good show this week where I'm going to talk to Lance over at Omega Yeast. We're going to talk about the importance of yeast in craft beer and homebrewing. This is Beer in Front. Every week I'm going to talk about a craft beer that maybe we've forgotten along the way while we get our check-ins and our badges. Being the Chicago beer guy, I'll also talk about great craft beer in the city of Chicago. That's Beer in Front, coming up now. Welcome to episode 103 of Beer in Front. How is everyone doing this week? I have a great show. I sat down and talked with Lance over at Omega Yeast. We had a great discussion. We talked about the importance of yeast in craft beer and also home brewing. So I think this is something that everyone will be interested in. Great interview. That'll be coming up later in the show. This Sunday, I'm going to talk to Jamie and Heath over at the E14 podcast. I'm looking forward to talking with both of them. That should be a fun time, and I'll let you know when that episode drops. Next week, I'm going to talk to Brent Raska. He's the owner of Burning Bush Brewery. They're celebrating their second anniversary, so I'll talk with him, and we'll discuss the brewery, everything that's happened in the last couple of years, and also details on their second anniversary coming up next weekend. And in a couple weeks, I'm going to sit down with my friend Derek. He's calling in from Poland, and we're going to have an episode on Polish beer, so look forward to that one too. If you want to support the show, you can. I have a Patreon over at patreon.com/beerinfront. I also have other ways of supporting the show, buymeacoffee.com, all sorts of stuff like that. And if you can't, I get it. But if you could please drop a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen, that helps the podcast out as well. And I do appreciate all of your support. In beer news this week, Heineken, Carlsberg, Molson Coors, they're among the beer bigwigs. They're going to pause business in Russia with all of the stuff that's happening with their assault on Ukraine. But Anheuser-Busch is going to continue to monitor the situation. What's there to monitor? Just stop it. Run the Jewels in Brooklyn Brewery. They're teaming up on a collaboration beer for the group's 5-show run at Madison Square Garden with Rage Against the Machine this coming August. You can go to their website and help design the can art if you'd like. So that's really cool. Check out the Brooklyn Brewery's page for details on this Run the Jewels beer. Budweiser is coming out with Budweiser Supreme. Now, this is a golden lager that has honey malt. I don't know, it just seems like every couple years they put out this new premium Budweiser, like Budweiser Select, and what do they have? Bud Light Platinum for a while, and it never seems to... American Ale. Remember American Ale? But no, they're going to come out with Budweiser Supreme soon. This coming Monday, March 21st, Eris Brewery and Cider House. They're located on Irving Park Road in Chicago. They are hosting a benefit beer fest for Twisted Hippo, which burnt down a couple weeks ago. Tickets are $75 a person. They're going to have over 40 different breweries that are involved. Food is from the fabulous Smoke. So if you're in Chicago, March 21st, which is Monday, head over to Eris Brewery and Cider House and support Twisted Hippo. I'll include the link in the show notes so you could head over there and purchase your tickets. And also on March 21st, the Chicago Brewseum is hosting a virtual conference called The African Influence on American Craft Brewing. This looks very good. It's between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Central Time, and you could go to chicagobrewseum.org for details on how to log in. It's a Zoom virtual conference. This looks really good. I'll be dialed into that. So check out chicagobrewseum.org. Well, I'm very happy to be talking to Lance Shaner. He owns Omega Yeast. They're located at 4720 West Pensacola. They also have a location in St. Louis. if you drive down Montrose, you see their big Omega Yeast painting on the side of the building. So, Lance, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you could drop by.
Yeah. How long has Omega Yeast been in operation? Could you tell us about the beginnings, your origin?
Sure. So we officially opened in 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first culture left the office in May of that year, something like that. The idea for it came late 2012 when I was having a conversation with, I was a patent attorney before I did this.
Okay.
So I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues who was starting 1090 Brewing up in Glenview. Mm-hmm. And he was just talking about where his yeast was going to be coming from. And I have a background in yeast biology. So it was literally that conversation that sparked the idea to do this, because there's nobody else doing it in the Midwest. There are a couple labs out in the West Coast, one in Colorado, and that was essentially it at the time. So it just seemed like with the growth of craft brewing, especially in the Chicago area, that there was a niche to fill, and that we could get off the ground by just supplying local breweries. So I went home, like the night I had this conversation, went home and told my wife I was going to be starting a yeast lab and stopped being a lawyer. So that she ended up coming around eventually, but it was, I think, quite a shock at the beginning. So, and in the planning then, right at the beginning, I was talking to one of my other colleagues at the firm, Mark Schwartz, who ended up becoming my business partner. I was just kind of shooting the idea at him to see what he thought. And he came to my office a couple of days later and asked if I wanted a business partner, and said, sure. Like, this is obviously a big undertaking to do alone.
Yeah.
So, and he likes doing things like going to City Hall and standing in line to get, licenses and things like that. Like all the kind of stuff I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. So he kind of deals with, the business side of things. I deal with operations and research, and it ends up being a good division of labor for us. So we actually started out in the costume shop, like right next door.
Yeah.
So we had around a 1,300 square foot space there, and be lawyers during the day and come up here at night and do the yeast thing until it was growing enough where it was just not sustainable. We were killing ourselves by, with the schedule we had. So I left the firm in August of that year to do this full time. And we've grown, outgrew that space and ended up buying the building next door, the Montrose building. And then as soon as we were in there, we realized the pace of growth we had, we were going to outgrow that building too. And it just so happened that there were two houses, where we're sitting now. One of them was completely abandoned. And then the house next door to it was people living in it, but the house was for sale. We were lucky enough that they happened to both be zoned manufacturing.
Oh, okay.
So we snatched them up and built from the ground up the building we're in right now, which was great because it allowed us to, we'd learned a lot in the 6 years that we'd been operating at that point. So we were able to build this building, knowing exactly how we want it laid out to fit the process that we had kind of come up with over the years.
Yeah, and you also don't have to move across the city or to a suburb or anything like that.
Yeah, to move, it was about the easiest move one could imagine. I mean, we just had everybody come in on a Saturday and just, shuttled stuff from one building to the other. And we had a completely new wort system here, so we were able to get everything running and be comfortable with it. And it's like, okay, we can do the move now, and really had no downtime because, we had kind of redundant systems. So it made for a pretty painless move.
Yeah.
And this building just operates much more efficiently just because we were able to do it from the ground up to fit our process.
Yeah. Now, when I was looking at your website doing some research, there's a lot of professional breweries that use your product. A couple of ones I saw locally were like Pollyanna, Old Irving, Broad Ripple out in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
How does that come about, and what's the process like? I'll just use Old Irving, for example, because it's right down the street. If they call you up and say, we're going to make this style of beer, do you normally have something in stock ready to go, or do you work with them to create something that suits that beer?
Yeah, so we do things a little different than some of the other yeast manufacturers. So a lot of them will produce large amounts of various strains, and then they'll package it up and it'll wait to be ordered. But the way we work is when the customer orders, they tell us what they're going to brew, what size the batch is, what strain they want if they know, or they'll ask for advice for a strain. And then we'll start that process right then. So they'll order like a week out. They'll order, we start growing the yeast up to the pitchable amount that they need for their batch size. Mm-hmm. So it's as fresh as possible because it's a perishable product.
Yeah.
In the liquid form, its shelf life is limited. So people get the best experience if they're getting very fresh yeast. So I think that's one of the things that's helped us grow at the pace we have is that they get fresh yeast from us and it's a good experience. So they keep coming back where, rolling the dice to some degree. If you might get something that's 3 months old from somebody else, it's going to take a long time to get going, and then your tank's occupied for a longer amount of time. So that's been one of the things that's helped us a lot. It means we have to be very nimble and always have the capacity available to handle these things. But that's something else that we've just kind of learned how to do all these years is to always stay a little bit ahead of demand and plug in more capacity as needed.
Is the bulk of your commercial sales, is it local to the Midwest, or do you have all over the country, world?
Oh, all over the world for sure. I'd have to see. It's been a while since I've seen our sales broken out into regions, but certainly I think we have the biggest foothold in the Midwest for sure. Yeah. But a lot out east and the South, and California just has tons of breweries. So. Yeah. So we do a fair amount of business out there, although there is, more competition out there. There's a lot of other, but, considering that, we do pretty good out there. And that's, I think, because we are also always developing new products. So we have yeast strains that you can't get anywhere else. So if you want some of these new strains that can do things that, strains from other people can't, then they have to come to us.
Yeah.
So that's how we'll kind of remain competitive in places where we're not local necessarily. But yeah, we all over the country and all over the world.
Now, some of the strains that you were talking about that, others don't do, I noticed that you have a strain called Cosmic Punch, which is for a big tropical aroma for someone making a hazy IPA. You have a Bonanza that has pear and banana. So if someone wants to make like a milkshake or a stout. So, those are things that, you just can't find. Like, if you're a home brewer, you can't go to Brew and Grow or go online to Northern Brewer and find something just like that.
Yeah, well, not from anybody else. You can find those things from us at those places. But, it's strains like that. So we bioengineer some of these newer strains. So if you've seen CRISPR in the news, won the Nobel Prize last year. But we use that as a technique to modify yeast strains to give them different traits. So like the Bonanza strain, for example, we used CRISPR to induce the same point mutation that's already present in American ale strains, English ale strains, that makes them not phenolic. So if you've ever had a Belgian beer and it's got that kind of clovey spiciness to it, that's a result of this gene that happens to be broken in a lot of lager yeast and ale yeast. So we basically broke it in the same way in the Hefeweizen strain, which is known for making, a lot of banana aromas, but also clove. So we basically broke its ability to make clove. And so now it only makes banana, which kind of opens up, styles like that, like milkshake, IPAs, things like that.
You have over 75 different strains. Now, are all of those available for commercial brewers as well as home brewers, or?
So anything in the public catalog, pro brewers can order, and we'll do the same custom process where we started growing in the pitchable amount. It's the homebrew side works a little differently, and we do have to kind of, predict demand, and we don't make all of the strains available because then there's just not demand for a good portion of those strains. So we'd be making a lot of it and it'd sit on the shelf until it expired. So the selection is a little more limited for homebrew, but it's still, I don't remember what it was the last, 30 strains. It's a lot of strains that are still available for homebrewers. And we do make it so that shops can order any strain in the catalog. Mm-hmm. They just have to order, 20 packs of the ones that aren't on the catalog available anytime.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, any strain in the catalog is available with those caveats.
I'm a failed home brewer. I started 20 years ago, and I think the first thing I used was that little envelope of Muntons, the dried yeast, and then you graduate to US 05. And then on from there. But I would think if I were to get back into it, I would buy your yeast. Okay, you're providing yeast to professional breweries that take home some hardware. So if it's good enough for Great American Beer Festival gold medal winners.
Yeah.
It's definitely good enough for, my pale ale. So that has to be a great, selling point for Omega.
Yeah, we did it. We had a nice little streak going there where 3 years in a row at GABF, the gold medal in the most populated category won using our yeast.
Oh, wow.
So it was Hailstorm. I don't remember the years now, but this was before the really kind of astronomical rise of hazy IPA. So they won for a West Coast style IPA, which was the most populated category at that time. And then the next year, Old Irving won for Beezer in the hazy IPA category, which was the most populated then. And then the next year, it was Lejeune for Alarmist that won. So and hazy IPA. So it really kind of established Chicago too as kind of this like hazy IPA center. I don't know what it is about the way they do them here that the judges like. I don't know what people consider the Chicago style to be. Maybe not quite as sweet as some of the Eastern ones, although some of these are pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But judges apparently like them, and so that was fun to be to kind of see that statistic come across.
Also, not only are you doing yeast for home brewers, but I noticed that you have a line called Proper, where you have a yeast nutrient for seltzer, a starter package for if you want to, brewing beer, you have a starter package. But to the seltzer nutrient, it said on there that you could create a batch of seltzer at home in as little as 4 days.
Yeah. So we have one dried product that we do get commercial manufactured. So that's the dried Lutra Kvike yeast. So using that in combination with a proper seltzer, which is, one thing, unless you're an experienced brewer, you may not realize that wort, so barley malt, provides anything yeast needs to grow. So you just go through the brewing process and it provides the sugar and nitrogen, all the minerals it needs to grow. But if you're trying to make seltzer, which is essentially just sugar, you have to replace that. So that's what proper seltzer is. It's the nutrient that provides all the nutrients that normally would come along with wort, but you need those for the yeast to grow and ferment that sugar. So using dried Lutra and proper seltzer and fermenting at a warm temperature, you can turn around a seltzer in 4 or 5 days.
Do you notice, because seltzers are so popular now, are more and more people brewing seltzers at home?
We move a fair amount of those, the small homebrew sized quantities of those. So it seems like people are experimenting. I mean, it's I think a lot of brewers kind of slag it, but it's an opportunity to be creative. Each kind of just start with like a clean palate, and then you can really experiment with flavor additions, spices and fruits and things like that. So it does provide a pretty good opportunity to be creative, and some people have problems with gluten and can't drink beer, so it's an opportunity for them to make things, or they have spouses, significant others that don't like beer and but want to experiment with things like that. So it fills a niche.
Yeah, and it's also a quicker turnaround time if you were to brew even if you were to lager, it's going to take a lot longer if you could pump out a seltzer in a week or so. Yeah,
sure.
You think definitely the home brewer would be more interested in doing that.
Yeah, no, it's a quick way to have a nice, sparkly, easy drinking beverage.
One thing that I noticed, and I'm half Lithuanian, and one of the strains that you have is a Lithuanian farmhouse yeast. How did that come about?
That was it is a fun story. So I don't remember the year. It's been a while now. It's probably like 2015 or so that somebody from the Lithuanian consulate in Philadelphia reached out to us, which at first we thought was like a weird catfishing attempt or something, because it was because consulates don't normally reach out to a yeast lab. But they were reaching out to us on behalf of Aldona Udrian, a brewer in Lithuania, who had been kind of told over the years that by beer tourists that had tried her beer that, you must have a unique yeast strain here because this beer is unique and good. So they had reached out to us on her behalf to essentially try to make this strain available to brewers. So there was a period of time, going back and forth negotiating so that we could, and we filed trademarks on her behalf in the U.S. so that we sell her strain and she gets a royalty from the sales of that strain. as like a kind of retirement plan. Just because our understanding is she doesn't have family that wants to take over the brewery, so the brewery might end with her. So this is kind of some extra income for her and we can use her brewery name on strain. So it was a good arrangement for both sides and makes for a fun story.
Yeah. As a home brewer, sometimes I know I found it confusing where you have so many different types. And even with yours, you have, 8 different British ales, 5 different West Coast. Now, the website is great, Omega Yeast. You have calculators. There's a lot of resources for home brewers. But why are there so many different types for, just the common home brewer that may not know?
Yeah. I mean, this yeast have evolved just over the centuries of use and kind of gotten their own, unique characteristics where they make, different fruity esters, and some of them flocculate better than others. So which is the process of them kind of sticking together and dropping out of the beer at the end of the fermentation. Some of them are spicy, some are not. I mean, there's just a huge collection of traits that vary from strain to strain. And, I think part of the fun of being a home brewer is just kind of exploring all that and finding the strain that works best for what you're going for. I mean, haze is another, dealing with hazy IPAs now. There are some strains that are better at producing this stable haze that you come to expect in beers like Beezer and Lejeune that, look a lot like orange juice. And a lot of that is the interplay of the yeast and the hops and the time that the hops are added. But yeast is critical to giving it that sort of stable haze. There are some strains, if you were to use them in the same recipe, would drop crystal clear.
Yeah.
So, that's another factor to think about. So, yeah, there's a lot of variations, and, some might be more subtle than others, but there's just a whole world of yeast out there to explore if you have the wherewithal.
Yeah. Everyone can find you at omegayeast.com. It looks like in homebrew shops all over the place.
Yeah.
In Chicago, where the bulk of the listeners are, Brew and Grow is available.
Yeah, Pursuit Supply right down there. Yeah, and a lot of times they'll just kind of, if you order from them, they'll then pick up from us. So they're another really good place to get.
Yeah, I think Nome, further down on Montrose, they have it. And also, you're available at the big online retailers like Northern Brewer, places like that?
Yeah, and Adventures in Home Brewing, and all those sorts of places. And on the website, there is also a place to search, and you can search by people who do mail order or brick and mortar only. So, yeah, those tools are available.
Yeah, I mean, and for those listening, check out the website, omegayeast.com. Makes me want to get back into home brewing. It's a wonderful resource for home brewers. So, if you're a home brewer, I definitely recommend going to omegayeast.com. Lance, I really appreciate it, brother. It was fun talking to you, fun to get a little backstory on some of the yeast. I know you're busy, so I'm going to let you go, but thanks so much for telling everyone about yeast.
Yeah, I was glad to chat with you. Thanks for stopping by.
All right. I want to thank Lance over at Omega Yeast for coming on. That was a fun time. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeast is really important in craft beer, and I'm not sure. I know people that are in the beer community, they know this, but if you're not in the community, if you're just a casual beer enthusiast, I don't think you realize the importance of yeast and the proper yeast in making beer. You could have the same ingredients, but use a different yeast, and you're getting a totally different beer. It's one of the 4 ingredients in the German purity law. There's only 4 ingredients. Yeast is one of them. I think of yeast more as like a great record producer. The Beatles were the Beatles, but without George Martin producing them, they wouldn't be the Beatles. They'd be John, Paul, George, and Ringo. It was the producer, George Martin, that brought out the best in them, and yeast kind of brings out the best in all of the ingredients and lets them shine. So yeast is very important. I really want to thank Lance for coming on. That was a fun time. The beer in front of me this week is from a brewery that utilizes Omega Yeast. This is from the Old Irving Brewing Company. This is a Glow. This is a double dry hopped India Pale Ale. It clocks in at 5.2% alcohol. and it includes Citra Cryo Hops, Vic Secret, and Luster. So let's crack this open and try it. Glow is a nice, light golden color, hazy IPA. The aroma is outstanding. I'm getting a lot of fruit here. For me, the fruit that I'm getting the most out of the aroma is peach. I could be wrong, but yeah, I feel like I'm getting some peach out of this. Yeah, wow, that's really good. Hops really smack you right up front. This is excellent. Yeah, very, very fruity, very tropical, very stone fruit that I'm getting from this. This is really good. Old Irving always knocks it out of the park when it comes to their IPAs and their New England styles. This one is no exception. If you see it, grab it. That should be like a catchphrase of mine, because I think I say that every week. But no, if you see this, grab it. This is a Glow from Old Irving. Excellent beer. You will not be disappointed. All right, that's going to wrap things up for this episode of Beer in Front. I thank you so much for listening. Once again, I want to thank Lance over at Omega Yeast for coming on. You could check them out at omegayeast.com. Next week's going to be a good show. I'm going to talk to Brent over at Burning Bush Brewery. That'll be a good one, so that episode will drop next Wednesday. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next week on Beer in Front.